place that is spoken about only in whispers. A dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends. A place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day, it hides just outside of view. But when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night, roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, sitting across the board from me, as always, Mr. Tim Dennis. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening.
You enjoying the weekend?
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, huh?
Yeah.
Nice, relaxing weekend. You can't ask for more.
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
I'm not laboring much.
No?
No.
I have been. I'm out at Dragon Con busting my butt, having some fun out here.
Like that's work.
Well,
going around
I'm sitting at a
Dragon Con.
table, handing out flyers, talking about the radio show, talking about the paranormal with a bunch of fantastic people. A lot of listeners stopping by the booth.
Good.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We got a good show tonight. One of our favorite guests is back. We've got Hr.1 Winkowski is joining us. She's the real-life ghost whisperer. She is one of the creative consultants of the hit CBS TV series. She is also the inspiration for the main character, Melinda Gordon, as played by Jennifer Love Hewitt. She's always interesting. We're going to talk to her about her book. We're going to talk to her about the kickoff of the new series of Ghost Whisperer, which comes out October 3rd on CBS. You're going to want to check your listings for that. And talk about some of the changes that are taking place on the show and see where we're at with the fire that took place. You know, Universal Studios had that fire earlier this year, Tim.
Yeah, they did.
And it wiped out the whole part of that back lot where they filmed Ghost Whisperer. It's the old, what they call the Back to the Future lot. Mm-hmm. They've actually changed that whole lot into Granville. So that's where they film most of the Ghost Whisperer. And I know that's been knocked out, so we'll see how that's going to affect the show. Again, if you're interested, Hr.1 Winkowski, you want to check out her website before we get into the show with her, too. It's MaryAnnWinkowski.com. That's WINKOWSKI.com. You can see all the great information up there about her. You can also order her book, When Ghosts Speak. So I hope you will check that out. And some cool videos she's got on there, some great stories. She's also looking for people that are dealing with earthbound spirits that would like to be a part of her next book. There are links there to deal with that. As always, on Sunday nights here, we want to kick off. We're going to have our book review segment, and we've got on the line with us. And, Tim, you're going to punch in the line for me here? We've got online with us the lovely Susan Cummins, and we're going to be talking to Susan. Susan, you've got a cool book series that you alluded to last weekend that you've been reading and been deeply engrossed in, and it's called Odd Thomas, correct?
Yes, Odd Thomas. All I have to do is say, fry cook from Pico Mundo, and people that are Dean Koontz fans will know who I'm talking about.
Now, is this series, how long has this series been out now?
You know, the original book, it's a series of 4. The original book, Odd Thomas, I believe came out in 2005. I may be wrong on that date.
Okay.
After that came Brother Odd. After that, then we're looking at, let's see, it was Odd Thomas, and then we were talking about Brother Odd, then Odd Hours, which is number 4. So it's been out for a while.
Okay. Now, it's only 4 series, is that it, or is he going to continue the series and there's only 4 out so far?
Well, the ending of this book, which of course I can't tell you, leaves it open for number 5.
For a sequel, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Well, break us down for a little bit. Let's talk about Odd Thomas, the book series. Let's talk about the first book in the series and give us a little taste. What exactly are we dealing with this series?
Well, I think why people love the series is Odd Thomas is a guy like anyone else. He wants to be normal. He wants to be incognito. His whole goal in life is to be a fry cook, to make the best pancakes, to fall in love, to have a dog, to have a normal life. But unfortunately, he's been given gifts that does not allow that. He sees ghosts, and they're always seeking him out.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
and now,
yeah.
Is there a creep factor to these books as well? Dean Koontz is so great at writing creepy stuff, or is it more of just an everyday kind of thing?
No, there's always a creep factor when you're talking about Dean Koontz. he also has sidekicks. I think during the first 3 books, he has Elvis with him. What
Excellent.
Really, yeah, it's great. For Elvis fans, they're going to love this because he shows up in different outfits continuously. But what I love about Odd is, he says, the dead don't talk, and I don't know why, but they try to communicate. That's one of the very first lines from one of the very first books. And he just seems to be drawn in continuously to these situations to where spirits are reaching out to him. And like Dean Koontz, he throws in some romance. I mean, you would never think to actually tear up in one of those Dean Koontz supernatural scary books, but it does pull at your heart. I cried during the first book, and I was hooked.
Now, so it's got a creep factor. It's got a good pathos. You really feel some connection to the characters in this book. That's important to me because there are some books I start reading, and I'll tell you what, if I can't be grabbed by the second or third chapter, I'm done.
Yeah, everyone loves Odd Thomas, and all you have to do is say, amongst the horror genre followers, all you have to do is say Odd. Everyone knows who you're talking about. Odd Thomas he's created a name for himself. And I have to go back. It's Odd Thomas is the first book. Forever Odd is the second. Brother Odd, and then Odd Hours.
Well, what's Forever Odd? How are we picking up in Forever Odd now? Is there
Forever Odd, of course, is a continuation of our lovely Fry Cook's, life. He gets involved in voodoo in the second book. A friend of his is kidnapped. And again, just like the first book, he doesn't want to be involved. He's this reluctant hero, and that's why I think we all can relate to him. Someone who is drawn in, doesn't want to be involved, doesn't want to see dead people, but he has a good heart. And it's basically good versus evil throughout all of his books.
Now, are these kind of mystery books? Are we trying to piece together what happened and who did it, and the spirits are trying to help Odd Thomas get through this?
Well, different stories with every single book.
Okay.
Yes,
in
there's
book 2
always
here,
a mystery factor, but it always involves the dead, which, for us paranormal geeks, we love that. It always involves the dead, but different mysteries, different what-ifs for each one.
And in this one, he's trying to find his kidnapped friend, correct?
Yeah, he's trying to find his kidnapped friend in the second book.
Okay.
The first book talks about he is able to see spirits, also dark spirits, dark creatures that show up at tragedies. The third book talks about he's trying to escape the fame that has been brought to him by the people that know him, and he's trying to lead this really, low-key life. So he goes to live at a monastery in the third book.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, but, things seek him out. Because of his abilities, he can't run away from who he is. And I think we all feel that at one time or another with relatives and work. We just can't sort of escape the burdens of our everyday life. That's what makes him so human. That's why we connect with him.
So he's, like a flame, like a moth to flame. These spirits are seeking him out now because they know he can help. And
oh, yes, yes. And he can't, the beautiful thing, he can't figure out why Elvis can't move on. And Elvis shows up in the first 3 books, and you just love it. I mean, it's one of these things where you go, okay.
Now, are the dark spirits trying to stop him from helping? Are they kind of his evil nemesis in this series of books?
I would think the human factor is probably the more evil of them all. He doesn't make spirits out to be evil. It's people wanting to use his abilities. It's, the sinister side of the human spirit that keeps showing up. I don't think it's the spirits, though they do show up continuously. They draw him in seeking help. And then, of course, in the last book that just came out in May, and for all of us Koontz fans, I pre-ordered mine, it brings into sort of modern-day threats, terrorism, and, of course, evil, the evil side of humanity.
Now, is this book series all running current day? I mean, it's, in the 2000s that it's taking place, or did they start it back in the 70s to show us who Odd Thomas was?
It's all current day. Yeah, it's all current day. And so it's a great book, the last one that just came out, and it leaves you, of course, on that edge of a cliff saying, what's next with our lovely Odd Thomas?
So, all right, well, it sounds like a pretty decent book series. In the fourth book, you said they do leave open. Now, did you know at the end of the third book that there would be a fourth book in the series?
Well, he keeps surviving, so the fact that he keeps surviving and he is a pet project, I think, of Dean Koontz. People have related so much. He has his own website. He has his own avatar, Odd Thomas. he has a life of his own at this point. And he gets fan mail. It's the strangest thing. A character in a book gets fan mail. And if you go to Dean Koontz's website, you will then have a link, or you can find a link to Odd Thomas's website, where he comes out and talks to you as an avatar, telling you about his life, about his burden.
How sad is that, Tim? We don't get fan mail, and a fictional character is actually getting fan mail.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
And I really can picture this as a series. I think it will be made into a movie, like all of Dean Koontz's books. I swear we've all watched them. Odd Thomas is going to have this life of his own that's going to continue. I don't know how many more books, even if he's not planning another book. Odd has made a name for himself.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for chiming in with us as usual. And you got a book series in mind or a book story for us next week you want to break out?
Well, you know what? I'm going to start to look at some paranormal books. I have a few that are sitting on my nightstand that I'm going to look at reading. So I think I'm going to have something more from the paranormal side of things.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week with the brand new book.
Yes, and Tim, belated happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, Susan.
Yeah, so everybody have a great day, okay?
You bet. And then we're gonna actually have you back in the second hour when we have the ghost whisperer, Marianne Winkowski, on with us, because you think you've got a haunted house.
I really do think I have a haunted house. Yeah,
cool.
I'm very excited
Well,
about that.
I wanted to kind of bring in, we've got the lovely Nicole as well. Our movie critic is going to come on, and she's going to spend some time with us on the show tonight because she thinks she's got a haunted house. So I thought this would be a nice way for you guys to kind of get introduced to the show and introduced to some of the guests we have, and see if we can't get to the bottom of the mystery you guys are dealing with your own haunted homes.
Yeah, the fact that I think I just keep bringing things home with me from these trips, Dave.
Oh, no, don't say that. It's all good.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know where I get them from.
The only thing we bring home from the trips is souvenirs.
That's right.
Live ones.
Absolutely.
Yes, live ones.
And I paid no extra for it.
Excellent. Well, a lot of people would probably like to come if they knew they could take a spirit home with them. Well, stay tuned for the second hour. We're going to be back with Marianne Winkowski, the real-life ghost whisperer, and we'll have the lovely Susan sharing her story of the paranormal from her haunted house. You're listening to Darkness Radio. Good evening. Welcome back to the Darkness on the Edge of Town radio show. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Stay tuned. We got a fantastic show for you guys tonight. In the second hour, 10 o'clock, we've got Marianne Winkowski, the real-life ghost whisperer, is going to join us. She's going to help us figure out if some of our listeners have haunted houses. And then in hour 3 of the show, from 11 to midnight, we're going to talk to David Franklin Farkas. And Mr. Farkas actually will show us how to clear our homes remotely from dealing with spiritual attachments and negative influences that seem to be there. It's going to be a great show. We got a lot lined up for you, so make sure you stay with us. And we want to thank Susan again for spending her time with us here this evening and giving a great book review on the Odd Thomas series by Dean Koontz. You can find that book series at every major bookseller out there. Right now, though, we're going to go to our national news correspondent. We're going to talk to Mr. Bill Murphy from California. Good evening, Bill.
Hey, good evening, Dave, and hello to you, Tim.
How you doing?
Thanks a lot.
I'm doing good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us again, Bill. Now, let's give people a little bit of background. I know we had to rush through things last week because we were trying to introduce all of the new characters to the show. Bill, now you've been involved in the paranormal in one way or another, investigating or researching for how long?
Since 1993.
Okay. And was there one key element that kind of struck you that made you really get that holy crap moment that you had to start investigating this stuff?
There was that moment in 1993. However, I wasn't prepared for what I experienced, so I actually didn't start investigating my own experience and others like it for several years. But do you want me to tell you what happened in 93?
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I grew up in New Orleans, and when you grow up in a town that's got a lot of ghost lore associated with it, it's got a reputation, and it's, everything's, the graves are above ground so we can hang out in the cemeteries, and it's pretty much a town that's been stricken with a lot of sudden deaths due to natural causes, man-made disasters, diseases. So it's just part of the culture. And when you throw into the mix, voodoo and witchcraft and everything that makes New Orleans what it is, you get maybe a bit jaded to it. You take it for granted. You grow up with it, and it's just all around you. As a matter of fact, my own mother, I wouldn't say she dabbled in witchcraft, but she certainly remained educated on it, and I was able to inherit from her several books that are many, many years old on practicing witchcraft. It's an area that I don't necessarily indulge in, but that's just my background. But what happened, I moved to Los Angeles in 1989, and when I went back to visit my parents with my wife at the time in 1993, I went to go visit them, and we're sitting in their living room, and we're just having an alert conversation about life in California and what's been happening in the past year in New Orleans. And the four of us sitting in the den. My then wife and myself were facing my parents, and I thought it was a small animal entering the room. They had like this oatmeal-colored carpet in the den part of the house, and I saw a dark figure come in down low. I looked, thinking it was a cat or a dog, but I knew we didn't have any pets. At least last time I was there were no pets. And I realized it was a foot, and then I looked up, and it was the leg, and it was the silhouette of an entire figure with a large, wide-brimmed hat. And it was transparent in the middle. Later I would learn this would be a shadow person, but it didn't fit the same description of shadow people that I've since researched, because it was transparent in the middle. Only the edges were defined. So as it passed between us, I could see my parents and the other side.
It's almost like a
room.
reverse shadow person. You're just seeing the outline.
Right.
Okay.
Just the outline, and the outlines were defined, and it was sort of feathered as far as the darkness towards the middle where it was completely transparent. It was aware of the surroundings because it went in a doorway. It avoided where we were sitting and walked between us and went out another doorway, and it scared the wits out of me. I mean,
when it went out these doorways, did it open doors and shut them, or did it just pass through them?
The doors were open, so there was like the double set of doors leading into the den from the entryway of the house. So it kind of walked in from that area. I didn't see it pass through that door because I saw it once it was in its room, but it was coming from the direction of the double doors. And then when it passed in front of us, it went out of a single width door that leads into a hallway that goes into the kitchen and the living room and rest of the house. And I didn't say anything. I watched it. After, maybe it seemed like it was about 5 or 10 seconds, I jumped up out of my seat and scooted into the hall to see where this thing was or even see what it was. And my parents were kind of leaning back in their chair, and my mom had her arms folded, and my father had his hands in his chin. My then wife had her jaw hanging down, like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, no doubt.
And my parents said, okay, tell us what you saw. And like so matter-of-factly, the way they asked. And I said, well, didn't anybody else see this? And nobody had. And I described it. My parents looked at each other, and they said, it's the same description. And I said, excuse me? And they said, it's the same description that people, when they visit the house, describe. And they often think it's an animal coming in, and they realize it's an entire, human figure. And I said, well, what do you mean people keep seeing this? And they said, we've never seen it. It's like we've been living here. They lived in a house for 50-something years, 52 years. They lived in a house. They had it built for us. We had a fairly large family. And I am the only one in the family of my generation, my brothers who have seen it. My grandmother apparently saw it. My parents never did. But several visitors to the house saw it, and it seemed to take that same path. You'd be in a different room, and the one thing that is you can see from various parts of the house is the main central hallway. You can see that from the kitchen. You can see it from, they have a very large living room and a large dining room. And that hallway, you can get to any of the rooms. And it seemed like they would take the path coming from towards the den towards the kitchen. So people that were in the living room were actually the ones who had seen it. I was the only one who saw it from the den. It was truly frightening. I have no idea what the hat meant, but then years later, it's actually been in the past 5 years, when I started actively researching shadow people,
right,
that I've seen that there are not only renderings of similar figures all over the internet, but written accounts, and many of them, I would say the majority, I haven't tried to do a survey either way, but the majority seem to have this large, wide-brimmed hat. I don't know what that hat is. I don't know if it's an apparatus or it's part of the physicality or disguise, but that's what was my first encounter into the world of the paranormal. And after I learned of science-based investigating, I decided to use that route because it was too illogical, too irrational for me to comprehend at the time. And it was very, very frightening.
Well, it sounds like it's still something that's pretty hard to wrap your head around. I mean, that's a pretty big thing to have happen to you. And again, that's kind of a totally opposite version of every other shadow person experience that I've ever come across. So
yeah, because most of them are solid. Most of them appear to be filled in. I mean, you know, many of us, yourself included, who have been to like Waverly Hills, you know, we've seen shadow figures there that appear to be more fuzzy as far as the definition, but filled in. This was defined on the edges, yet transparent in the middle. It was almost something that once you have an encounter like that, a personal encounter, even though I've tried to use science in all my work since then for validation, it's hard to go back. If you have a sighting, if you have a vision, you have a personal experience, it tends to somehow allow other sightings to become visible. I think I've said this before on your show, Dave, but it's like the filter that we all have in our mind that allows us to perceive what we need to perceive in order to operate in this world, it becomes partially disabled if you have an encounter. And then if you allow yourself and you start working it, you can have more experiences with the other interdimensional beings that appear to be all around us.
Oh, I agree. I think once you've removed that filter down and you start to open yourselves up, as we've talked, in the past on shows, and as we did last night on our UFO show talking with Preston, when you remove those filters down and you allow things in, it does seem that they start to show up a lot more often. Now, have you investigated your parents' home again, or is that no longer their home? Have you lost the opportunity to go back in and see if you can still experience this thing there?
I did not actively investigate their home. I, with the exception of after probably about 3 years, because we didn't speak of that event after it happened, because to be honest with you, if you have something like that you're really not supposed to see, you're not supposed to see transparent people.
Right.
At least according to the textbooks that we're all taught, people.
Right.
But I was kind of concerned about why I saw this. It can be almost embarrassing to tell people that aren't prepared for it or that are not involved with paranormal research, and so I didn't want to really appear as a kook. My validation actually didn't come until I read the term shadow person on. It was actually on the internet, and it wasn't really related to the paranormal, but it had this one little passage about the shadow person visiting this woman who was going to go to sleep, and she had a shadow person, and it didn't really elaborate on it, but then I Googled that term, shadow person. I said, wow, that's kind of
started your whole belief system. Well, we got to take our break here, Bill. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more news stories from our national correspondent, Bill Murphy. Welcome back to Darkness Radio. Appreciate you spending your Saturday and Sunday nights with us here. We are here every Saturday and Sunday from 9 p.m. to midnight, and we do archive all of our shows, so if you can't catch a show live, do check the website at www.ktlkfm.com to get your fix, and that way you can keep up with all of our past episodes. You can also check our previous airings of shows that have been for the last 2.5 years by going to darknessradio.com, clicking on the archives button, and you'll be able to pull up any of the shows that we've done over the last 2.5 years. So I hope that you will check out those and let your friends, family, and relatives know about the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. Now it's time to go to our guest again. We have Mr. Bill Murphy, our national correspondent. And, Bill, we're going to be spending every Sunday night with you telling some of the stories and sharing news stories from around the world. Actually from in our own backyard here in the United States. Let's start off with a couple of stories. What have you got for us this week?
Well, I want to talk briefly about something that has been in the news quite a bit lately, and that was the hoax that was exposed with the Bigfoot that was...
Right, like we covered last week. Sure.
Yeah, we covered it last week, but what that has sparked has been renewed interest in Bigfoot research, cryptozoology in general, and a lot of other organizations are they now have they have the media's attention. And it's actually interesting. One thing I did not know, and I started to do a little research about it, but California is the capital of Bigfoot sightings. I didn't realize it was actually Humboldt County is where there have been more sightings than any place else.
Really?
No matter where you look in the world as far as news reports go, the one thing that is consistent is that where Bigfoot sightings occur is where most people cannot venture to easily, and that's in very high elevations that are shrouded in trees, so mountaintops basically. And if you go up there, you will likely freeze. So it's not a place where you can easily track or necessarily even put up tracking devices and put up motion detection cameras. So I didn't know that most of them have happened in California. I think of Yeti and Sasquatch and
Right.
think of other places, but it's been up in the mountains, and the scientific community takes this very, very seriously. As a matter of fact, there's a Mr. Jeff Meldrum. He's an associate professor of anatomy and anthropology at Ohio State University. He just received a $130,000 grant to conduct a scientific investigation into Sasquatch's existence. So there is research being conducted. People are actively trying to prove the existence of Bigfoot. It's very, very plausible. I mean, I used to actually be more of a skeptic of Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Yeti than almost any of the paranormal realm.
Right.
I would believe in an alien before I believe in Bigfoot.
Right.
There's some irony to that statement, but
Sure.
that was just my personal belief. However, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new species discovered every year on this earth. It happens all the time, virtually every day. If you watch the news and you look for the news on this subject, you will find species of all sorts. They're going to be there are species that are insects. There are species that are fish. There are species that we thought have been extinct for 2.5 million years, and suddenly we find them. With all that being said, there's a lot of wilderness there that still needs to be tracked. And I'm starting to think, well, okay, I need to not be closed-minded because I've prided myself in being, I'm a cautious. I wouldn't say I'm a skeptic. I do believe in the existence of a number of different phenomena, but I do need enough proof to satisfy me personally. And I'm now open to the possibility that we may be able to find existence of creatures similar to Bigfoot that have been eluding us so far.
Very cool. Well, what other stories do we have that's going on or out there in the United States right now about this? And I will say, I'm happy to hear that the hoax didn't, irritate so many people that they've just kind of thrown their hands up and now they're looking at it as a joke. I'm glad that science is still taking a hard-edged nose look, at this, and that they're going to continue to investigate it and try to get to the bottom of these.
Well, actually, another benefit of this, and related to the story, is the fact that if you're going to take the report seriously, then you have to examine the credibility of the witness or of the researcher. And that was the undoing of the recent hoax that, it kind of took everybody, including the unfortunate promoter that paid in advance to those folks because he wanted to actually show the body. So that was for financial gain that hoax took place. However, with that being said, there are a lot of people that are staking their name on it, and they're okay. There's a Mr. Hucklebridge, and he is a General Electric jet engine mechanic, and he's a supervisor. And he worked for Northrop Grumman, so he was working on military projects. And when people like that start going public with sightings that they've had, particularly people that have been in a position to have sightings, in other words, low-flying aircraft, spotting families, because they're saying that that Bigfoots, they're not solo creatures. They do operate as families. They have a social network, and they kind of have their own structure. They work in pockets of families. So the sightings that have happened with them, it's been with between 3 and 6 at a time, and then you see other groups of 3 and 6 nearby, almost like they'll set up like a camp area.
Yeah, that's interesting. We had a speaker on our show about a year or two ago, Tim, that guy that was tracking and said that he actually knows how to find Bigfoot nests.
Yep.
And his whole thought was, that they work in almost like a military fashion where they work in a group, and the reason that we can't find them is because they have sentries posted that keep an eye out while they're foraging, feeding, doing whatever they do. Their job is to, the sentries will let them know with the grunts and the knocks and the things like that, and then they'll retreat and pull out of a nesting area as they see people coming. And this gentleman has figured out a way to actually kind of sneak in and around the back of the nesting sites, if you will, and they've been able to get in there. So, that's something I think is kind of interesting that you're saying that there is more proof that maybe these things work in a pod or in a pocket, if you will.
Yeah, they do seem to have an organization. They've set up a society of sorts. They are protecting their own. They could be very dangerous to approach. I mean, any animal that lives in the wild, when they have their young nearby, it's a natural instinct for them to attack. And I don't think it's anybody's intention that is civilized to actually want to harm one. You don't want to shoot it to prove that it exists. It doesn't mean that there are not kooks out there that would try to do that. But the science community is being very careful. Nobody wants to set up a trap. We just want to photograph it. And at the very least, they want to obtain audio recordings. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if any of you guys remember that short-lived show. Well, it was short-lived only because it was about eight episodes, and that's all that were ever produced. It was called Sci-Fi Investigates.
Right.
Well, on that show, they set up audio recorders all around the areas where there had been Bigfoot sightings, particularly in California. And we have voice print analysis for virtually all species on record. Mm-hmm. All of them. I mean, if there's a roar out there by a lion, you can identify even the type of lion it is. So we all are very distinct. Humans have a distinct vocal range, and all animals do.
Sure.
Everything that's not in a subsonic or ultrasonic range that we can hear and we can record has been identified. And they were able to obtain a recording it's the only one so far that I've seen that remains unidentified that is associated with Bigfoot. And I tell you, it is a very eerie recording. Maybe on the next show I'll obtain that and I'll play that for you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
It's like a cross between a gorilla and a coyote. It's a yelp growl, and it's very menacing, and it's a warning. So if you hear that, and if you're looking, you're entering somebody else's territory. It's probably the kind of thing you don't want to necessarily stick around. Set your camera up and take off, because it was definitely a territorial growl.
Wow. Now, yeah, I mean, they've been able to pick these things up, and they get these strange knockings, these thump, 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 thumps through the woods. It's almost like they're signaling to one another. And I have heard some of the Bigfoot or Yeti howls that they call them. And I will admit, I mean, it kind of freaks you out. It's got a definite tonality to it that sounds very threatening and menacing. Now, do you think, though, that that's their threatening posture, or is it because, like with coyotes and wolves, they howl so that they could spread the news over a longer distance, right? They're kind of making announcements or alerting other creatures in the forest of what's going on, or other relatives of its own. Do you think that maybe is more what it is, instead of an aggressive stance, that maybe they're just getting more of a communicative
think, actually, Dave,
skill?
It's almost, it could be one of the same. It could be announcing its territory.
Mm-hmm.
It could be it's a mating call, and at the same time, it's a warning for others to stay out of its territory. This is its ground.
Sure.
And they want themselves known. The irony is that the Bigfoot sightings that we've seen, or the very few photos in the Patterson film that most people have seen,
mm-hmm.
You can't identify the gender.
right.
of what they are. So who knows what the male versus female look like, what the differences are.
Well, let's take our break here. We'll come back. We'll discuss some more news. We have one more segment to go with you. Let's get a couple of the ghosty stories you have lined up. You're listening to Darkness Radio. Welcome back to Hour 1 here on Darkness Radio. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Stay tuned. We've got some great guests coming up. In about 15 minutes, we're going to be back with our first guest, Marianne Winkowski, who is going to come on. She is the real-life ghost whisperer. She is one of the inspirations for the character Melinda Gordon on the CBS hit TV series Ghost Whisperer, and she is one of the creative consultants for the show. This is actually Marianne's 4th or 5th time she's been with us here on Darkness Radio. First time you guys get to hear her on K-Talk. Fascinating guest, has some great stories. We're going to be actually taking calls so that people can set up and see if they do have a ghost in their home and get some of the background and information on that. Then in our second hour, we're going to be talking to David Farkas, and Mr. Farkas actually can help you clear your homes, and he does it in a remote style. He's shamanistic, is not psychic or a medium, but still has the ability to deal with and kind of dispatch the spirits that you have in our home or in your home. We're back live right now with our national correspondent, Bill Murphy. And, Bill, I had asked you to pull up some good news stories for us dealing with ghosties and reported ghost sightings here. What have you got for us this week?
Well, there is actually a really compelling piece of evidence that was recorded quite by accident in North Carolina. It's the Asheville, North Carolina High School. And they have surveillance cameras running day and night. And then they're reviewed during the day. I mean, I don't think they would necessarily review them, all the footage that was recorded at night just to do it, but they do have people that do, like, spot check.
Right.
And they recorded an apparition that is one of the better ghost videos that I have personally seen. And I have a little, just a short clip. I'm going to play it because we're on radio, and just so your listeners can kind of hear the commentary. I'll preface it by saying that the school has taken a position that there are no hauntings, that there are no ghosts that roam the halls of Asheville, North Carolina High School, but then they explained the reason why. They said the last thing they want to do is scare their own student body and not have students attend school. As we all know, public schools receive funding based on attendance. So there's a direct correlation. You scare the students, they don't come to school, the budgets are slashed. Every single week that there's a drop in attendance, budgets are slashed by the feds to that school. So with that being said, you're not going to hear anything of the ghost because it was just silent surveillance, but you can listen to some of the commentaries real quick.
Okay, great.
All right, here you go.
But I didn't have an answer, so...
What you got on camera isn't the most common thing. That is really extraordinary.
Paranormal expert Beth Strickland says this is not the case of camera malfunction.
That definitely is paranormal activity.
An apparition, or ghost, if you will.
And definitely, rule out lighting there, that, because you can see its movement and the shadow, in the mist. That's what they call a mist. And then definitely it came to form.
So there you go.
Right. Now, you've actually seen the footage as well, correct? And I think you can YouTube the video, and it was on CNN and Fox News that they actually showed this.
Yeah, it's been covered by all the major news media, so if you want to go to YouTube and you just do a search of North Carolina High School Ghost, it'll bring it up, and then you can play it. It's actually, it's a 2.5-minute long piece, so it's pretty good. It's got the commentary from the school officials, from the local newscasters, and then from some paranormal investigators that analyzed it.
Well, what have you thought by looking at it? You've reviewed and you do a lot of forensic video analysis yourself. Something that was kind of interesting when I noticed and I watched the video is that it does seem to cast a shadow that follows it as well on the floor. Is that, do you see spirits that cast shadows like that?
No.
Or am I just misseeing it?
Generally you don't. The only kind of shadows that we see are if you want to talk about paranormal, would be a shadow without a form, a shadow person. In this particular case, this one is odd. The scale of it is such, and then the movement of it appears to mimic what a human would do, because it comes like out of an elevator, and then it goes, but it does go up in the air. So it does seem to have the ability to levitate. But it's a very good piece of video. It's one of the better ones out there. It does not appear to be a bug or a dust mote or anything close to the lens. it's a good video, and it's worth taking a look at by anybody who's curious to see this particular shot. So just go to YouTube, and it's right on there.
All right, very cool. What other stories have you got for us? We got about 5 minutes left here in the show for the first hour.
Well, I just wanted to mention one thing that we were going to be talking about, but I realized we're running out of time, and that's what's happening, and this is kind of related to all the recent attention with Bigfoot. It has brought out other people that want to comment on the paranormal. In this case, it's aliens that may be visiting Earth. And I was looking for stories that would have the very most credibility.
Sure.
And what we're finding is that when people get past the age where they're concerned about either prosecution or reputation or being fired from the job, but many people are coming out from NASA and talking about the photos that have been obtained, the video that's been captured, a lot of the radio chatter that was going back and forth in the Apollo series, so going back in the 60s to 70s, was not encrypted like it is now. Now we're very select about what we allow to be intercepted by television receivers and broadcasters here on Earth. So it's encrypted, so it's only from the space shuttle or the space station down to a receiving station on Earth. But prior to that, you were able to intercept it. And if you listen to some of those early recordings, on the dark side of the moon,
hey, Pink Floyd taught us there is no dark side of the moon.
I'm sorry?
I said Pink Floyd taught us anything. It's that there is no dark side of the moon, Bill. Come on. Who are you trying to confuse?
Oh, I'm not trying to confuse anybody. How about this? The side of the moon that does not rotate in our direction.
Excellent. Good choice.
So they are pyramids, bridges, and piping structures that appear there. This was observed from Apollo 8, Apollo 11, and Apollo 14. Astronauts from those three missions in particular have gone public. Buzz Aldrin, he has been very public about it. He is willing to take the ridicule in some case. He's being ostracized by many of his peers. A lot of these people, they've had to swear to government agencies that they will not go public with certain aspects of their missions. But
right.
At this point, he figures, you know what? I'm in my twilight years. I am going to go public. The world needs to know. So what's happened when they landed on the moon even, there were certain areas of the moon, and remember, if the moon is in a vacuum, there's no real atmosphere.
Right.
But there were areas that were enshrouded in like a fog-type substance. And when they're able to penetrate that fog, there are structures that are built on the moon. And that could mean a number of things. We'd like to say that maybe an alien life form built it. However, we really don't know how many times civilization on Earth has developed and maybe wiped ourselves out and developed again. The Earth is billions upon billions of years old. We could have nuked ourselves 5 times over by now, and we could just be yet another generation in developing technology now. Ancient technology that we're finding now is really interesting. So it doesn't mean that we visited visited the moon once before. But that's just another theory. Despite thinking that we're older than what we currently believe as far as our own development, it does appear that there are structures on the moon, and also using ultraviolet cameras, not infrared, but ultraviolet cameras, when they're out into space, they're seeing other spaceships. They're seeing other vehicles.
Now, who's seeing it? NASA? They're seeing it on their cameras?
Yeah, they sure are. From the space shuttle in particular, lots of them. And they are moving, and they're taking erratic paths that don't adhere to any of the laws of physics as we understand them. So that means they're somehow able, when I say they, whoever's operating these crafts, and maybe they're drones, so it doesn't have to have occupants, but they're taking turns that aren't possible, and they're going at speeds that aren't possible. If you use the Earth as a scale, because we know the circumference of the Earth, and you know how far a shuttle is from it,
right.
And you have an object down below that's taking erratic 90-degree and 180-degree turns much, much faster. These things are going over 900,000 miles per hour.
Holy cow.
The fastest vehicle that we can build goes 50,000 miles per hour out in space. 900,000 miles an hour. That's alien technology, or it's our future selves. Who knows? Maybe we've learned how to time travel, and we'll come back to show ourselves now what we can do in the future.
Well, Bill, thanks a lot for this. We'll talk to you again next Sunday with some new news stories. And everybody else, stay tuned. You're listening to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. We're going to be back for the 10 o'clock hour with our guest, Marianne Winkowski, the real-life ghost whisperer,